Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Lucy Yu. I'm the panel chair. I think because you have my panel's names and organisations behind me, we'll get straight into the discussion. So this session is all about powering the transport of the future with clean energy. So from offshore wind, creating energy independence for maritime, to the electrification of rail, to moving freight via eTrucks, and sustainable fuel alternatives for aviation. We're going to explore how the integration of new technologies and expanded infrastructure will enable the UK to meet its net zero goals and also create a more efficient transport network. So I'm going to ask each of my panel to just spend a few minutes, five minutes or so, just describing their ventures or their organisations. Tell us what you do, who you work with, what problems you are addressing, and maybe a little bit about the investment behind your ventures and its structure. So I'm going to start with Sophie.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Eynon. I work as a programme manager at Places for London, which is TfL's property company. You may have gone to the event earlier where Graham Craig, our CEO, was talking, but just to recap, we are the property company of TfL, and we have over 5,500 acres of land across London in incredibly strategic locations. We've got a mission as a company to unlock potential in our land across our estate, and this is where my programme comes into play. We are delivering an EV charging hubs programme focusing on ultra-rapid charging hubs. The reason we're doing that is we have strategic locations across London at transport interchanges and on major roads where we know there is demand for electric vehicle charging, quick, on-the-go charging, and we know that there's a need for EV charging infrastructure. So Transport for London recently published an update to their electric vehicle infrastructure strategy, which states that by 2030, London will have over 1.4 million electric vehicles, of which we somehow need to charge. And as part of that, we have made a commitment across London to try to deliver that infrastructure from a public perspective. And we think that about 51,000 charge points are required, of which a focus on ultra-rapid charging so that we really consolidate the infrastructure in one place and we don't have street clutter everywhere. So in December 2024, we launched a joint venture, which is a first-of-a-kind joint venture. There's not another one like it at the moment, to my knowledge, where we partnered with Fastned, who are a European major charge point operator. They have over 300 charging hubs across Europe, and we're partnering with them to deliver charging hubs on our land. So we're putting our land into the joint venture. We're funding 49% of it, 49% of the business we own as well, and we are making sure that we are getting the income from that. It's a growth sector. TfL should be able to make some income and reinvest it in the transport network. And we are making sure that we're driving forward standards in the sector. So making sure that it's accessible, sustainable, 100% renewable energy going into it, and trying to overcome some of the barriers that people perceive to be there in the electric vehicle charging industry.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sophie. So, Michael, you are also working on electric mobility. Absolutely. Please tell us about Voltempo.
Yeah, so my name is Michael Boxwell. I founded Voltempo about 6 years ago, and we were really focusing on the really high power charging stuff, so megawatt level charging. We manufacture a megawatt level charger in Birmingham, and we and the focus for those is heavy goods vehicles. So we got into the heavy goods vehicle market before there was such a thing as an electric heavy goods vehicle. Very quiet market to start with, I must admit. But we worked with fleets saying, look, this is coming and here's some opportunities and so on. And we bid for and won just under £50 million worth of grant funding from the Department for Transport to help fleets buy a lot of electric heavy goods vehicles to get going and to put electric charging into the ground. So we're now in a case we're rolling that out across the UK. 6 bays as standard, in some cases 12, megawatt level charging. and getting trucks on the road as well. So the people we're talking about here, people like Marks and Spencer's, Kuhn and Nagel, Wincanton, GXO, Maritime, Menzies, but also some of the smaller SMEs as well. You know, the regional companies like Welsh's Transport, who were talking on one of the other forums earlier today. IJ McGill's down in the West Country, Expect Distribution up in Bradford. So we're getting the whole of the industry along, which is really quite exciting. We're partway through the rollout at the moment. By the middle of the summer, we'll have a network that covers pretty much the whole of the UK. So near to the strategic road network, at ports and places like this. And what we're doing is we're putting charging into fleets' own depots and then sharing it amongst other depots. So we've done over 1 million miles of electric HGV driving now within the consortium in the last year, which is an incredible achievement so far. And we're building up this network which will be available to any heavy goods vehicle owner. Turn up in a Tesla, we'll chase you off, but if you've got a heavy goods vehicle, we'll charge you. We're also making sure that we can bring the prices right down. So I know if you're doing rapid charging at the moment, you're looking at 80, 90 pence per kilowatt hour for rapid charging. We're charging less than 40 pence. So bringing that price right down to make it viable for people to switch from diesel trucks to electric. So that's what we're doing as an organisation. Really exciting times. We started with eTrucks. There's now over 100 trucks that are being rolled out at the moment, and the aim is to get to 3,000 to 4,000 trucks within our programme by 2030.
Great, thank you very much. Exciting. So I'm going to move to James. James, you're doing some really interesting stuff to support cleaner maritime. Please tell us more.
Yeah, afternoon everybody. James Wright, I'm HSE lead at the Port of Tyne. My primary function is I look after the health, safety, environment of everybody at the port operationally, just day to day. But the sort of wider piece that I focus on, particularly in this clean energy area, is the port's decarbonisation strategy, and then linked in as part of the wider innovation team that operates out of the 2050 Maritime Innovation Hub at the Port of Tyne. I think it's probably worth understanding the Port of Tyne, we are a trust port. Means we can operate slightly different. We don't have shareholders. All the money we make goes back into the port. That gives us flexibility to do things slightly differently in what we get involved in. So we run clean energy test beds. So if people want to trial new technology, come and see us. If we can host it, we'll do it. If it will survive at a port, it will survive anywhere. So recently we've trialed 3D printed wind turbines to back up EV charging with batteries. We've done trials with small-scale solar panels that contain batteries within them that you can put in a tiled format on the roof of a boat to power lighting in a boat rather than diesel. So we'll get involved in these areas. Wider than that, clearly, operationally, we're, where we're based, obviously the offshore wind in the northeast, some of the biggest offshore wind farms, particularly Hornsea 3, which will be the biggest once it's up and running. Operationally, we support those projects, on our land, and obviously everything that comes with that. We're not just decarbonising our own operations. Our customers want to decarbonise, and obviously, then it's how we do that through, provision of power to them and vessels that come with it. So, we've got such a wide range of things going on at the port, and we'll describe, we are a small town ourselves. Our power demand just for the port in its own right is about 4,000 houses. That's before we get to customers, before we get to ships. So it's a really complex piece, and we're sort of seeing that with transitioning as well as operationally, but becoming that energy hub to support these big infrastructure projects. That's our primary function. Looking at things that, how do we charge HGVs that come to us? We don't have the grid capacity at the minute to do it. If you want to put a megawatt charger in, we need to think of other ways to do it because we don't have the power available as it stands. So, it's quite a complex picture, and where these things are going to electric, we're going to be a critical part of that, and we have to look at how we invest to set that up, whether it's for us or for our customers. It's quite a complex sort of picture that we have to deal with and prioritise.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 interesting case studies from the UK. We're very lucky because we are joined by Antti, who can tell us a little bit about the perspective from the Nordics and Finland.
Yeah, afternoon everybody. My name is Antti Suikkanen from Lahti Regional Development. So representing the development company in Lahti region, Finland. We are some 100 kilometers north from Helsinki, so pretty close to the capital side. We represent the 10 municipalities in our region and give our business services free for the companies in there. Some 15,000 companies in the region. So we handle business development from the birth of the company to the grave of the company and investment in actions in Lahti region. But also we run eMobility cluster, which is what I'm heading also. So our job in that eMobility cluster is see that all the stakeholders have the opportunity and have all the right tools to implement and forward our strategy in net zero goals. Lahti is a European green capital, but also a mission city in EU. And also we are aiming to be carbon neutral in 2028. So our goals are super ambitious, but what one thing is really that we need to tackle is the transportation, and especially on the heavy duty side. Of course, as mentioned, the megawatt charging, all of these, Kempower is one of our biggest companies in the region that is really kind of pushing forward in the European level and the world level. So it's nice to see that success also. But yeah, we are doubling down on of all of these that are just discussed, and nice to be here.
Great, thank you very much. So I just want to dive a bit deeper now, particularly into the investment side of things, because I think you all bring some very different and interesting perspectives. So if I start with Sophie, Sophie, you mentioned that you are operating through a JV model, and I thought just perhaps if you could spend a few minutes just kind of talking about maybe some of the lessons that you've learned from that model, and also what are the benefits of using that model?
Yeah, of course. So just to recap, we as Places for London own 41% of the company, and Fastned own 51% of the company. So we are slightly a minority holder in the business. And the reason we did it is because we wanted to make sure that we were delivering the right infrastructure, and we wanted risk and benefit out of the game of EV charging, to be honest. We wanted to take on the risk and sponsor it from a public perspective, to give people the initiative to kind of go out and deliver really high quality infrastructure that probably when you look at the price of some of it, you probably would say, oh, can you make some cuts there? But that is at the cost of accessibility, people with mobility issues, at the cost of safety, at the cost of security. So it was really important for us as a public sector to really come into the game and drive it forward. And yeah, on the other side of it as well, it's also getting the benefit back. So we receive 49% of the dividend, along with the land rent that we get for inserting the land into the joint venture. So as the sector grows, we as landlord aren't stuck with just a rent that doesn't grow. We as landlord are stuck with a very good asset and a proposition that we can then reinvest that into the transport network in whatever TfL deems fit and the best way of doing it. We're also using some of the income that's coming through to scale. So what I didn't say is the scale of what we're doing. We started with 5 sites. By 2030, the target is to deliver 25 sites as a joint venture, and we can grow further than that. So we've built a scalable entity, and that's a lesson learned from previous Places for London joint ventures, is these things have to be scalable. If you do a one-time procurement, you're not getting the best value, and you're not learning. The learnings we've had on our sites with regards to planning, how we approach the boroughs, how we get grid connection. It's not a one thing and done. It's very important that we have this scalable venture where we can implement lessons learned on the first few sites that we've had and really grow it as a citywide network is the aim. Lovely,
thank you. So Michael, you are creating novel, you're working in a novel area for electric mobility. You maybe tell us a bit about some of the insights you've learned about what makes an investable business model?
So it was interesting because right now it's difficult to make an investment case for electric HGVs. There are some areas of the market where it's a no-brainer. You can sit down and crikey, okay, the savings are huge. That offsets the cost of the vehicle in the first place significantly. And a good example of that is refuse collection vehicles. You know, most of them are doing about 3 miles per gallon on diesel in built-up areas. So you're using an awful lot of pollution there, but also an awful lot of cost, particularly at the moment with diesel prices where they are. Switching to electric there actually makes a huge amount of sense straight away. So they don't need investment, they don't need subsidy. When you're looking at general freight, that's slightly different because you know, if you've got a big 40-ton truck, the weight of those batteries means that you can carry less freight, and that actually is a big impact on the thing. So we're working with government very closely, both on legislation to resolve those problems, which is great, but also you know, government has sort of co-invested into what we're doing. So they've reduced the price of the trucks to support early adoption, so to get people to use them. What we're finding, when fleets have run them for a year, they're thinking, actually, yeah, these are working, we're comfortable with them and so on, and then they'll buy more themselves. So it's working in that way. And where we've used the government funding for the charging system, actually very similar, Sophie, to what you're saying. You can put charging in locations that commercially just make no sense at all because of the cost of the grid connection or whatever. Good example is Southampton Port. We aren't actually on the port. In fact, we're not on none of the ports, but we're really close to them. So Felixstowe Docks, we're on a depot just on the, you know, just outside the gate. And the same with Southampton, just around the corner. Bristol, Avonmouth, and Liverpool, and so on and so forth. So we're not actually on the ports because you haven't got the space for the vehicles, but we're really not really nearby. But in the case of Southampton, for instance, the connection cost was £1.5 million. We had to dig under a motorway, which isn't a good idea. So there's no way commercially that would have happened if it wasn't for the government support there. So it's using that, and then that unlocks the ability to take 300-400 trucks into Southampton every single day, electric rather than diesel. So that's a huge step in the right direction. And once you get some of those difficult barrier bits, you're building up that network. You're then making it into an investable model. So now we're in a situation where we can get sort of 40-50 million pounds worth of funding easily from asset finance in order to roll out that network and take it to the next stage and put hundreds of charging hubs on the road. Brilliant,
thank you. So James, we were just talking before this panel, and you mentioned a very interesting accelerator that you have at the port. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about some of the investments that you make as a port.
Yeah, I think so that sort of piece of work is the Venture Connect program that operates out the Maritime Innovation Hub. Our innovation director Elaine Scott's here today, who oversees that program. That's, you know, us working with SMEs and trying to put people in contact with, you know, that capital of venture capital where they work in the marine space, not necessarily working directly with the Port of Tyne. There's a separation between the two. The port as a whole, is because we're a trust port, we can look at things slightly differently, and that does sort of sometimes differentiate how we consider investing in technologies. When there's certain things that we will just do, make sense for our decarbonisation, so convert all our vehicles to electric. We just do it. There's other areas where we'll take a bit more risk. So we've just bought a brand new electric pilot boat. That's the vessel that takes pilots out to the ships to bring them in. So that'll be the first in the UK. We want to lead on that, so we'll make a decision and go with that. The other types of investments, again, we're looking at those sort of no regrets ones, but they are very big spend. So power, so the minute we're running 4 megawatts of power, we've secured 40 megawatts of power because we know that we're going to need to charge things. Vessels are going to want power. They're not in the pipeline now, but when it's a 2-year lag time to get that power, we just invest it. Let's just get on with it and get it so it's ready to go. The bigger piece is then around investing in renewables. Again, it varies case by case. They're land hungry. Big solar schemes, we don't have the land space. We get more value out of it by putting things over the quay and using it commercially. Same with wind turbines, the footprints and the areas, doesn't quite work for us in our land. All ports are slightly different in what land they have available, but for us, that's quite difficult. And then, moving beyond that, we're talking about clean energy for the future, alternative fuels for vessels. These fuels are less energy dense. Vessels are going to have to bunker more. Means that, rather than just being one hub in Rotterdam where they all go and fuel up, we'll need more. But again, it's, then we're moving into hundreds of millions of investment and land space. So we take varying views on how we invest. There's things that we just do and get on with, things that there's no regrets. It's going to set us up for the future and critical for our long-term business. And then, the bigger pieces where it's a, much more detailed, larger spend where we might need JVs, and critically as well on those big investments for ports, historically where, we build a quay, it's 25, 30 years, and we know we're going to use it for that long. When we're talking about providing, things for customers where it's in the millions, are we going to get 25 years out of that customer, or, they're running on 3 to 5 year contracts? So commercially, things don't necessarily line up. So there's potentially a change required in those commercial sort of areas that will influence how we invest moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Antti, any reflections from you? You've heard a few things from the UK experience. Is that sort of similar to what you have seen in Finland, or are there any key differences?
Well, there's a lot of similarities, of course, but in Finland, the investments, for example, in charging infrastructure is divided. So charging infrastructure investments are totally private. So there's no governmental involvement or the city or the municipality involvement. But what the cities and municipalities has to take care of is the land use and the legislation, and then, for example, the energy lines and connections. So if the investment comes, let's say, on the megawatt charging field that needs 10 megawatts of power, it has to be so that it doesn't take 3 years to come and for the legislation and the power lines. Good thing is that in Finland we have a really good grid condition at the moment, and really kind of one of the cheapest prices of electricity in whole Europe, and the mixture of power is 95% of non-fossils, so it is quite good situation. But we are still, let's say, if you talk about heavy-duty vehicles, working machines, kind of in a chicken and the egg situation. So kind of a trucking party is waiting that the infrastructure is getting built, and the infrastructure and the private market is still kind of waiting that, okay, when are these trucks going to come? So in our role as a development company is that now we push really hard that we open the, let's say, the envelope in one corner. So bring in the megawatt charging field in Lahti region, so we have something to begin with that really starts and pushes these investments forward.
Okay, great. So I'm nearly at the end of my questions, so there's just a heads up to the audience. If you have questions you're burning to ask, I think you will get a QR code fairly soon where you can submit them. But just to sort of close out the discussion, I think there's a lot of us in the room who are working in transport and will know there are maybe some misconceptions, either from the general public or maybe even from the investment community about transport and clean energy. And potentially some of these misconceptions may be barriers to investment and scaling as well. So I just wanted to come to each of you. I will start with you, Antti, just to see if there is any myth busting you want to do while you're in the room.
Well, there's no polar bears in Finland. That's usually the thing. But but the cold weather is a case, but it's not a kind of a thing that it's making it impossible. It can be minus 30, minus 35 Celsius in Finland. Of course, it's affecting a lot of battery life. But I think if we kind of taking precautive measures, when using EVs in these temperatures is not a problem. So it's not affecting the investment cases. What is problem in these cold conditions is that, for example, in wind power, the blades get frozen. So it affects on the prices of electricity quite a lot in the winter times. So in investment point of view, we have to see that even in these kind of weathers and conditions, we would have the supply of cheap, clean energy. For example, putting more on the nuclear side and small nuclear reactors.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to come in on this question?
Yeah, you said in Finland minus 30. I used to work in Salo, and the coldest I ever was minus 53. That was horrible. But a wonderful country. But yeah, one of the big questions I get asked all the time is, well, surely hydrogen is coming along, and shouldn't we just wait for that? Well, where I'm based in Birmingham at the Tyne Energy Park, we have a hydrogen refueling hub. If you want to buy hydrogen today, the pump, it's about £24 per kilo. 1 kilo of hydrogen is about 2.6 litres of diesel, so that's about £9 a litre. So making the maths work for hydrogen in road transport is really, really tough. And actually, the use of it is also not as easy as you think it might be. So we have a number of buses which refuel at this hydrogen hub, and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to refuel one of these buses. Well, you can charge an electric truck in that time. So the furthest we've driven in an electric truck in a single shift, we double shifted the vehicle, so we had two drivers. It was 1,700 kilometres, 1,100 miles. We drove from East Midlands Gateway through the Channel Tunnel through into Germany and back. We've also gone into France and so on. And yes, we did have to stop and recharge on the way, but it was possible to do it. And we learnt a huge amount from doing that. So you can do the long distances with the electric trucks. And do it effectively. In terms of the charging speeds, today, about 2 hours ago, we refueled an electric truck from flat, almost completely flat, I think about 12%, to full in 28 minutes. Just under a megawatt in speed. It's the first time that's been done in the UK, and we did that this morning. So that was at East Midlands Gateway as well. So you genuinely can charge these vehicles and go very, very long distances with them, and use them not quite in the same way as diesel trucks yet, but it's not far off.
Wow, hot off the press. Very exciting. And I will also say, rather delightfully, you have actually answered one of the questions from Anonymous. So for Michael, do you find there's still a misconception around electric versus hydrogen for HGV, or is this now shifting to a more balanced view? So whoever asked that question, thank you. I'll just see if anyone else wants to come in on misconceptions.
Yeah, of course. At this point, I probably shouldn't admit that I used to work on hydrogen. Now in a new life of EV. So I think there's probably 2 points that I want to make here in that. From a public and user perspective, I think there is a lot of a misconception that the EV charging infrastructure isn't there, or that it won't be to a standard which is good enough to let you charge and to let you get home reliably or let you get on with your journey. And I think that obviously was the case, right? I don't think we can say that it's never been the case, but we've come along so far. There is now really good infrastructure across the UK that everyone can use, and the standards are really developing across EV charging. So things are getting better. Reliability, there's more regulations around what you need to do in terms of uptime to make sure that you don't turn up to a charger and it is not usable. So I think the misconception was true a couple of years ago. I think now, when people say to me, look, the charging's not there, I fear getting home, I think my argument to that is it's there. Just trust it a bit more, because we've come a long way in A, delivering, and B, making sure that what we deliver is high quality and reliable. And then from an investment side, in terms of a kind of barrier, I think we touched upon it. Everyone says the big barrier is the grid connection. We need massive amounts of power. I think you mentioned more power than I could dream of in London. But everyone says it's a local problem, and I think it's what's really important to hit home today it's not a local problem, it's a UK-wide problem, that there's not enough power to deliver to these sites, and it needs mass investment in infrastructure across the UK to make sure that the distribution network is there. So if you're getting annoyed with your borough for not delivering it, or annoyed with TfL for not delivering it, and we say it has to wait a while, it's because we're waiting on kind of bigger changes to come down the line. So that's another barrier that we're waiting on.
Great. We will come back to that in a second. I just want to check whether James wants to chime in on this.
Yeah, a couple of points, I think, and one just to come back on a point that Antti made about something. But I think, when as a port, and future fuels, the fuels that we're talking about for vessels, particularly in the maritime, ammonia, hydrogen. Ammonia, horribly toxic. Hydrogen, if it goes wrong fairly spectacularly. If we're going to have these things in the UK and bunkering them, as ports, we are close to people. So there is an element of how they are marketed. And I think then it's important of people understanding why we are holding these fuels or using these fuels, because obviously as an island nation, 95% of our products that are coming into the country are coming through ports. So if we can't fuel the ships, that are bringing the goods to us, we're going to have an issue. I think in terms of those fuels and everything else, and to Antti's point about the low cost of electricity, the flip side for us, and that's a critical thing for that investment piece. At the minute, vessels will take 2 days out of their trip. It's more cost effective to take 2 days out of their run into Rotterdam to fuel up than it is to buy the fuel in the UK. If we're going to manufacture these future fuels that are less energy dense and they've got to take on fuel more often, we're manufacturing them at UK grid prices, which 4 or 5 times higher than Europe. So I think ultimately as well, if we're looking at these investments, there needs to be something done around that sort of base cost of electricity, where we're either manufacturing the fuel or providing electricity to visiting vessels. It's quite a critical piece for the business case for us, I think, on those ones.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to take a look at the audience questions. So one of the top voted ones, I'm not sure who this is for, any of you are welcome to offer comments. Would there be benefit from a national EV infrastructure mapping tool rather than having segregated tools per borough or provider? Where do you see the funding and ownership sit for this? Would anyone like to speak to that? Sophie, you look like you're bursting to say something.
So, yeah, we do have a UK national EV strategy, EV charging strategy, in which there is some mapping. But I think the more data that we can have behind us is never going to be a bad thing, right? Making sure that we're delivering the infrastructure in the right places is the key part to making any business case work. Because it's the key thing about making sure that we have the turnover and we get enough vehicles through to justify the investment in the infrastructure. In terms of funding that, I think the OZEV, the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles, is already doing quite a substantial amount on that. Obviously, we can all say that there's more to do on any part of policy, but I think they're doing a really good job and setting a good precedent. And then in terms of do people need to do it on a case-by-case basis? I would argue that for TfL we do, because London is such a different beast, and we need to kind of make sure that the infrastructure is provided across London in a fair and distributed manner. So I think it's a balance. Yes, we need more national EV infrastructure mapping, and I think it would be very beneficial, but it comes at a balance of whether the UK government can help us deliver that, and still with the need to make sure that we truly understand what goes on in our local environment and what we actually need in very local vicinities.
So Keir Mather, the Minister for Decarbonisation within the Department for Transport, announced a national mapping tool for the heavy goods vehicle sector of the market, and that was shown for the very first time on Tuesday. Which is good. What we're doing within that as well, because we provide a lot of the data into that, is looking at what the future for the rollout of the fleets are. So, these companies have now got a few electric trucks on the road. The next stage of our project is to say to them, guys, what's your rollout plan? And okay, ignore the costs at this stage and the barriers and everything else. If we can overcome that, we know how to. But assuming we do that, what's your rollout plan look like? Because that then tells us where you need the power in the future, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. It tells you how much energy you're going to be using in those locations. That then effectively means we can take that information to National Grid and all the DNOs and to NESO and everyone else, so that we can say, look, this is where we need the power. Can we have it? Yes, no. Sometimes the DNOs will need to upgrade a region, or we might need to get some money from NESO to upgrade it on a bigger scale. But effectively, it allows the energy companies to invest into the network, knowing there's demand, and invest ahead of need. And that effectively will stop us getting to a stage where we're starting to grow, and then we just hit a barrier because we can't grow any further because the energy isn't available in the right place. So that's the value of the mapping, if you like. So you won't necessarily see that as a consumer, but that's what's going on behind the scenes. Now, we're doing it with heavy goods vehicles. I know it's happening elsewhere in the industry as well. It's a little bit more difficult with cars because you don't exactly know where every car goes, although you do know at a high level. With trucks, every truck goes in advance and so on, so you can actually do some really detailed modelling in that way. So that's we're taking a lead on that, I think, at the moment.
Thank you. We're into the final stretch. We have a lot of interesting questions, but I'm going to use Chair's prerogative here, and I'm going to read out the top 3 that have been jostling for position. They're all quite different, but I want you to hear them all, and you can speak to any of them or all of them or none of them. So firstly, we have a question on hydrogen. Why do politicians keep talking about hydrogen when the economics and physics clearly aren't workable? How do we move the conversation, educate policymakers on this? That's the first question. The second question is about given the government funded 80% of the truck cost for the HGV project for charging, how can fleet managers justify the cost of eHGV tractors without the subsidy, and how will the ban of internal combustion engine HGVs be achieved, given the cost by 2040 without huge subsidies? And then the third question I'm going to come to, so we had the hydrogen educating policymakers, subsidy for HGVs, how do we wean ourselves off that subsidy? And then thirdly, with away from home charging being at a 7-fold price premium to home charging, what needs to change to make this more equitable and make away from home more attractive? So thank you to the 3 anonymous people who submitted those questions. You may take your pick, just catch my eye if you want to speak to any or all of them. Yes, Antti?
Well, I can start with the hydrogen. I was just in the Brussels talking with this subject and asked the questions about the hydrogen. So and really asked what was the situation. So it was really heavy lobbying going for the hydrogen, and then all of the politicians, especially in Finland and in EU, got really excited, even though there was not business case in there. There was not really a really solid case that this can be used in the transportation. And when the kind of funding and subsidizing went on and forward, we saw that this was kind of a puff, and now everybody's kind of backing up on EU level. So in Finland especially, we see that, okay, hydrogen has a place maybe in steel industry and in chemicals and these kind of things, but in transportation is a long shot. It's the structure, the molecular structure of it, the kind of transportation, everything. It's really hard to justify.
Okay,
thank you. Anyone else want to comment on? Yeah, James.
I think just sort of on that hydrogen piece, obviously the sort of area of work we've been looking at is, obviously a lot of the business case comes down to making the hydrogen and the high level cost base, which is obviously the point I made earlier. But it's then critical to the alternative e-fuels. We need the hydrogen to make the ammonia or the methanol. It's a critical part of that. Or we've discussed around using it for storage, an alternative form of storage. Produce the hydrogen, store the energy, convert it back. So I think there's a recognition that we need to, obviously clearly moving away from fossil fuels, we've got to look at the bigger picture. Say, certainly the area of works we're looking at, ultimately, the hydrogen, it does come down to the manufacturing and the cost. And I think that's the piece that needs to be looked at. And if you can make it, at a reasonable price, then it might have legs to do it. But I think, as Antti said, we're probably looking at different types of transport, converting it to a different fuel that will work in a ship rather than road-going vehicles. Certainly for us, it's not, hydrogen, we're not looking at it for plant and equipment, but certainly for pride and fuels to vessels.
Okay.
On the HEV side, so you're absolutely right. There was a just under 80% grant for the trucks, so it made them very cheap, which is good, but that's not sustainable going forward. So again, you've got to look at the bigger picture. If you talk to fleets about decarbonisation, it's not a high priority. Their customers say they want it, but they're not prepared to pay a penny extra for it. That's the first issue. The cost of running the electric trucks, yes, is much cheaper than diesel, but the upfront cost is much higher, and you lose some of your flexibility. And you then start talking to fleets, what are your problems? And they're saying, well, look, I'm working on 1% profit margins. I haven't got money to invest. Number two, I have real trouble recruiting drivers to work for me. There's a driver shortage already. The average age of a driver is over 50. 150,000 of the 600,000 HGV drivers on the road today are going to retire in the next 10 years. There's a crisis coming. Solve those problems for me, and that's the way to do it. So autonomous vehicles are coming. We're starting to see the trial vehicles running on the roads of London. They've been running in San Francisco and Los Angeles and across the States and in China. And so we started investigating that. About 18 months ago, we got some funding to help last year, working with the Connected Places Catapult on a research study. We had a huge interest from industry on that and what we can do with autonomous heavy goods vehicles. We've now got 4 truck manufacturers saying we want to work with you on this. We've got 69 fleets saying we want to work with us on this. And then you start looking at what that does to productivity. And it is an enormous difference. You're looking at a 35% savings running autonomous vehicles over driven vehicles. It's a significant amount. You're looking at go back 7 years, logistics in the UK were ranked number 4 in the world in terms of productivity. We're now at number 19. If you get 30% of the potential market by 2035 on autonomous vehicles, you're way up over number 1. It adds a significant amount of money to the UK economy. It's a measurable at UK economy level. It's that huge. So that's where we're looking at going forward, because that effectively funds the decarbonisation journey really, really, straight away. No problem at all. It's a no-brainer. Payback within a year, 2 years to do that. So that will drive it forward, and those sorts of savings can be realised. So we will have an autonomous vehicle running. Autonomous truck running on a test track in South Wales, either at the very end of this year or early next year. We will have them running on the roads in trial situations with a safety driver next year, and the idea is that we'll actually have them running with freight and be taking the drivers out of the vehicle, starting on the strategic road network and various other sort of use cases, starting from 2028 onwards. This is going to happen very quickly. We're going to see these on the roads. So that, if you like, is the next step, and that effectively helps fund this whole of this transition.
Do you want me to cover the last question?
Please.
So how can we make away from home charging more attractive? So for TfL and London in general, this is a massive issue that we have. Over 66% of our population in London do not have driveways. So it's not a situation of you have a choice. You have to use away from home charging. So in terms of where we specifically focus on with Places for London and the joint venture on the ultra rapid charging, which is over 200 kilowatts, you charge in 15 to 20 minutes. The things that we're looking at is some policy leveraging. So currently we are charging about 79 pence per kilowatt, which aligns with the FastNed network. But the policy that we need to look to change is at home, you pay 5% VAT on any charging that you do. So, sorry, when I say home, this is on-street, low-powered chargers. They only pay 5% VAT. If you go to a hub, which has ultra-rapid charging, you are the companies are paying 20% VAT. And the argument there is obviously we're delivering clean energy, and it's for people that can't have the privilege of charging on the street very slowly or at home. So that is the first policy lever that we'll need to pull. The second one, I think James touched on the high price of electricity. That is a massive one that we need to try and find a way of bringing down. But in addition to that, as part of the energy price, we have very high prices for distributing the energy. So there are distribution use of system charges, which are quite prohibitively expensive, actually, when we try to get power to the chargers for the volumes of power and for the ratings of power that we're going for at 200 kilowatts. So that's the other area that we're looking into, is how can we leverage for kind of more funding for the distribution network so that we can bring those prices down, so the kind of price that the customer gets reflects a lower energy price and a lower cost of the distribution that takes to get the energy to your car, basically.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you to the audience for all your questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours. We are out of time, so I will just ask you to join me in thanking our panel.